Hi everyone. Welcome back for another episode of Chat Over a Dram. We've got a very special guest from Singapore. Hi Matthew.
Hi guys. Hi everyone.
Thank you so much for joining us. Just for the people watching, what time is it there in Singapore at the moment?
Just hit 4 p.m. So yeah, 4 hours behind you at the moment.
Well, thanks for your commitment to the show. I
Pleasure.
know, and I asked you just before what dram you're going to have, and you're having a highball.
I am. Look, being 4 p.m. I am up. I'm big on whiskey, up for it any time of the day generally. But I'll be at home for the rest of the evening. If I start going heavy on some drams now, I'll be a bit of a mess by. Well, not a mess, but you know that feeling you get when you start drinking early and you feel a bit lethargic and tired later. So yeah, going easy on a highball with Bellican.
Right. But also, I believe it's were you going into summer now? You are in summer.
We're about 50 miles off the equator here, so we do have a slightly cooler season and a slightly stormier season, but we'd hardly call it summer or winter. It's a little bit different, but it's always about 31, 32 degrees here.
And what's the temperature now like during the day today?
I used to have a joke with a friend. He'd say, what's the temperature today? And I'd just say 31, 32, because that's what it is almost every single day. Rare exceptions. Right. It's almost always 31, 32.
Yeah. And I've been to Singapore just the one time. I've been multiple times, but only one time out of the airport.
Right.
When our daughter, she was about to turn 1. And I remember it being very humid there. I don't remember what month of the year it was, but it was quite humid. And I remember drinking a lot of beer. Yeah.
Look, I drink a lot of beer here too. Other than whiskey, a nice cold pint is my second favorite drink. And it does get very humid. That's one thing we do get a little bit of difference of across the year. Is some seasons are a little bit more humid, some a little bit drier. But we've just been through an exceptionally humid patch. Sit inside in front of the fan, and the sweat will stick to me while I'm working.
Yeah. That's good. So can I ask? Let's start with what sort of whiskey you're drinking at the moment, because you are in a slightly. We had I live in the Waikato in Hamilton in New Zealand, and it was 1 degree this morning, very cold. Yeah, and I've got a heater about 2 feet off me, which is enabling me to wear my t-shirt or polish. So, what sort of summer drams are you into, or what sort of whiskeys are you enjoying at the moment?
So, we've been in. We're not calling it lockdown. We're calling it circuit breaker here, but we've been in that for about coming up to 2 months now. So, although we can go out for essentials and we are still allowed to go to liquor stores, I've taken it as an opportunity to work my way through a lot of the open bottles and sample bottles that I have on my shelf, right? Some of it's been sitting there in open bottles. I've been through a massive number of broken corks of that stuff that's just been sitting there for a couple of years. I had a bunch of sample bottles that had no labels on them at all. I've just collected. People have given me over time. Might have told me what it was when they gave it to me, but now I have no idea. I gave most of them a little sip, and if they were good, they got put aside. If they were average, I ended up with close to 2 liters of a vatted malt, a blended malt made with, little dregs that were past their best and sample bottles, and been working my way through that with a lot of highballs. Because it is hot, I'm not. We don't use the aircon at home, but if I'm at work days and going out to bars, the aircon's always on, so it's nice for a good dram. But here I've been having a lot of highballs, so gone through a lot of ice and soda.
Nice. Well, that's the thing, I grew up in northern India where we used to get an extreme summer and then an extreme winter, and during the summertime, the whiskey never stopped flowing. They just added more ice and water to it because beer was sort of seen as second tier. It was like a poor man's drink almost. But beer is very interesting now, obviously. Now, do you want to maybe there's a lot of people here in New Zealand, a lot of us who really love our whiskey, know everything about you. Do you want to just take us on a bit of a journey about what you've been doing with whiskey and where you at now?
Well, so I've been drinking whiskey probably for 25 plus years now, but I've been working in the industry for 13, 14. So started that in Perth, Australia, where I'm from, obviously. My first job in whiskey was part-time, but I worked for the Scotch Malt Whisky Society. So I used to run their tastings and training sessions in Perth for a few years. Loved that. Great product, great team. Andrew Durbidge, who's still there. I don't know if he covers New Zealand as well, if the Australian team cover New Zealand, or is it separate? Do you have a separate?
I met a gentleman at Dram first. Please, I don't remember his name, but he had quite a thick Scottish accent. So I'm wondering if he's working, here for on a short time or period. But yeah, I forget his name.
Probably separate then, because Andrew Durbidge and team largely take care of it in Australia, do a great job. Right. I only stopped working for Scotch Malt Whisky Society because I moved to Singapore, and I came here chasing a girl 10.5 years ago, who I'm now married to. But at that time, moving to Singapore, I decided I'm going to work in whiskey full time. So I did a bit of freelance work at first before I ended up working at the Old Alliance for a while, one of the top whiskey bars in the world. From there, I was approached to be a Glenfiddich brand ambassador with William Grant and Sons, which I did for over 5 years. And I've just finished up working for just over a year with the Whisky Store, which is a smaller group here, I guess. Well, not small here, but probably not very well known anywhere else. But they have bars and distribution and some retail in Singapore, and a great range of products. Things like Springbank, Bunnahabhain, absolutely lovely whiskies.
Yeah, and the Whisky Store. Did you say they have bars as well?
Yeah, so they're part of a group now. I joined at a time when they were going from being small, kind of privately operated family business to actually becoming a listed company in Singapore. At that time, some other bars joined, so there's now 5 bars in the group, 3 of which are on the whiskey side, 2 of which are on the cocktail side.
Right, because our friend there, well, I don't know a lot of people in Singapore, but Brendan from the Single Cask.
Yeah, not that group, separate, but yes, of course, I know Brendan very well. Good friends, always good for a dram and a bit of banter. Yeah.
But
I don't know if you're listening, Brendan, but if you are, hello.
He promised. He commented earlier that he will be joining, but
he did. Yeah. Hopefully he will.
But he was telling me how their bar. I've never been. I've only seen pictures. He was saying it's very small, 20, 25 people, and in my mind, that's how big they really need to be. It's not 100 seat or 150 seat kind of like a restaurant or a cafe. But can I ask? So, what was the bar you started working with first in Singapore?
The Old Alliance, AULD Alliance. Yeah, owned by a couple of people, mainly a gentleman named Emmanuel Dron, who's an insane whiskey collector and has been for a very, very long time. I think at the time I left, they had about 1,500 bottles on the shelf. It's probably higher now. And a lot of that's your very old, rare, vintage stuff.
Wow.
Absolute game changer when it first opened in Singapore. But now there's other bars that have a similar concept as well. We're spoilt for choice here. There's over 20 actual whiskey bars, where I'd say the main concept is whiskey, not just bars with a good range of whiskey.
That's interesting. I mean, in New Zealand, I can only think of 3. I don't want to get quoted on it, but there's 2 in Auckland, and there's some other ones. But they focus on a few different things. And a gentleman of the name Robert Auld has just commented that it's a good name. He's got the last name.
Right.
Robert, we agree. It's funny, even when I was in Tokyo, I went to the Tokyo Whiskey Library repeatedly several nights because it seemed they were focused. The staff knew what they were doing. Something you obviously profess quite a bit. The education and part of things. During your work in Singapore, what were your challenges? Are people keen on it? Staff keen to learn, or proprietors are proactive?
Like anywhere, I think there's a huge mix. I mean, there's a lot of people who work in the bar industry who are really switched on, really want to know a lot more about drinks, spirits, cocktails, want to excel and do the best they can at service. And they're always an absolute pleasure to work with. And you can spot them 10 words into a conversation because they're asking all the right questions straight away. You know, they know exactly what they're doing. But then, yeah, you do work with staff that don't care. You have people at tastings that are just there for cheap drinks or free drinks and don't really want to listen. You really run the whole gamut, absolutely. It's hard to pick a single one-off challenge that I faced. I mean, as a brand ambassador, I did cover Southeast Asia. Some countries or some cities are definitely easier than others. You know, some of the northern cities in Thailand, culturally, during a tasting, they will sit there in absolute silence and just listen. And I don't know about other people, but when I do a presentation, I like a little bit of interaction from my audience. It's not a lecture hall, right? They shouldn't just be sitting there in silence, just taking it all in, or just ignoring in silence, as some of them would do. I want people to answer questions. I want people to ask questions. I know some people hate it when the audience interrupts them. I love the questions and jokes even coming in. You know, one of the best for me is the Philippines. A lot of my tastings in the Philippines, I'd end up trading barbs, jibes with the audience towards the end of a tasting. They're like, this is great. This is fun. Not always sitting in their seats laughing their asses off. They're just out there to have a great time. Yeah, but a silent audience is really the worst thing. It's like talking into the void and nothing comes back.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you do a lot of training and obviously brand activations. I do quite a lot of sort of private tastings here for clients, you know. Find me through Facebook, and I remember doing a bachelor party, and the minute I started talking, they're heckling me, and I just like, you guys paid me to come here, and this is not a stand-up comedy show. I think they were just very happy, and since then I've been quite selective who I get in front of, because you know, retail is what I need to focus on. Education, you know, this is a good medium for it, or I can talk to people on Messenger, you know. But it's just very important. I noticed that in Tokyo, at Yamazaki in Hakushu, you know, at the end of the distillery tour, you sit down and they do a highball demonstration, and people, it's just pen drop silence. You will never get that in New Zealand. You know, there'll always be one guy just making a clown of himself, spilling drinks, and well, asking funny questions, or yeah, which is normally great. Sometimes they go too far and everyone else in the room starts to find them annoying as well. But usually you'll find other people in the room start to shut them up for you, which is nice. Yeah. So how many years were you with Glenfiddich?
Just over 5 years.
Right.
And which is a fairly long stretch as a brand ambassador. It can be grueling work, rewarding, but grueling.
Yeah. Well, on the road quite a bit, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. But you were doing just Singapore, or you were doing other countries as well, like say Vietnam and?
So officially it was Southeast Asia at first, but not every country in Southeast Asia. I mean, obviously not Brunei, because you get death penalty for drinking there. But mostly Singapore, Philippines, Malaysia, Thailand. Every now and then a little bit in Indonesia, Vietnam, Cambodia. I've done a couple of tastings in Cambodia. But no Myanmar or Brunei or Laos, which rounds out the rest of Southeast Asia, I think. Yeah.
Go on.
I got to do a few tastings in Mongolia once. For some reason, it was just an internal company thing. They didn't know what area Mongolia should be under, because they didn't want to be under kind of Russia. They didn't want to be under China for historical reasons. So for a while it was Southeast Asia and third-party markets. So yeah, I got to do a series of tastings in Mongolia in the middle of winter.
Wow.
And it was, I know it gets cold there compared to Singapore, but this was minus 36. It got colder than minus 36 while I was there. And actually, they wanted me in a kilt for some of the tastings. And you would think when it gets that cold, they'd be nicely set up for it. But no, when it's time to go, you get out of the bar or restaurant, you walk through the car park to the car in a kilt in minus 30 something. Yeah, crazy.
Yeah. Are you is there any Irish stock in your family, or you're like, what's your background? Like, I know you were born in Australia, but is there any lineage or?
I am 5th generation Western Australian, so we've been there a long time, but it's mostly Scottish with a bit of Irish and English in there as well. Yeah. Probably some Nordic as well, because a lot of people think I'm Danish or something in Singapore. They say, "Oh, you're from you're from," a lot of places in the Nordics, and no, I'm Australian. Oh, but your ancestry, no, from Scotland. But I figure that's just from Viking raiders who came across to Edinburgh and left their genes behind.
Yeah. Interesting. But, I find it fascinating that you're based in Singapore, which I thought is a massive market. I talked to Brendan about it quite a bit. Obviously, you guys have this massive transient population. People like myself on my way to Delhi or Mumbai or wherever in India, and there's any number of the countries, and you guys obviously do tourism so well. So you got that sort of 2, 3, 4 days, and you got conference. So I find it fascinating that you're traveling quite a bit to all these beautiful countries as well.
It's a great place to do it from. If you want to, if your business covers Southeast Asia, then Singapore makes absolute sense as a hub, a place to do operations out of. It's got such a fantastic airport. You've been through Changi a few times. Everything just works and is so easy there, unlike a lot of airports in Asia, unfortunately. And everything's close by. It's just wonderful and simple. And I knew I was going to be in Singapore a long time when I first came back from one of those brand ambassador trips. And we're starting to land in Changi Airport, and I thought, oh, it's great to be home. I mean, I'm not from there, but just this relief at coming back into Changi Airport after all the other airports I've been through. Yeah.
So are you a Singapore citizen or a resident now, or are you still an Aussie? How
what? I'm just looking at changing that, but actually all this time I've been on what they call an EP, an employment pass, which doesn't actually give you a lot of stability, but it's always been fine. Well, times are good, but now that it's going to be a little bit more difficult in the job market for a while, I'm looking at changing over to a different kind of pass while I also apply for permanent residency. No plans to seek citizenship at the moment because Singapore doesn't allow dual. I'd have to give up Australian, and that's a big decision.
Yeah, well, like you said, you're a 5th generation Aussie.
Yeah.
It's, yeah. And are you going back to Australia or firmly?
I used to go a lot, but not so much these days. We used to go back regularly for Christmas, but Perth in Christmas can be pretty stinking hot, and it costs 2.5 times as much as any other time of the year to fly there around Christmas. So we stopped doing that, but unfortunately I've been a bit lazy. I think it's time to book another trip to Perth. I think my mother will be very happy to see her granddaughter.
Yeah. And let's talk specifically about Glenfiddich for a little while. I mean, for someone like me, having been born and raised in India and then being here, and I mean, most of the world, I can't imagine any part of the world where Glenfiddich as a brand doesn't capture the imagination. Seems like that's the first. I mean, for bulk of the population, it is a luxury brand, right? Like people like yourself and I, we're exposed to some very expensive whiskey, which is lucky because of the work we do. But even that entry level $65, $70 Glenfiddich 12 is a luxury product for bulk of the population. Do you want to talk us through what you see? Because being in Malaysia.
Yeah, look, and there's a real double-edged sword with that tremendous success of the Glenfiddich brand. I mean, as you know, it's one of the, and I don't work for them anymore, right? I'm still happy to say nice things about Glenfiddich and William Grant & Sons because I still respect the product. I still love it. I remember my time there fondly. But yeah, look, Glenfiddich was the first single malt to actively market and distribute around the world, probably in 1963. And it was a success. It took a lot of time and hard work, but it's available in something like 195 countries around the world. That number probably changes regularly, but that's a huge number of places to be available. For many people, it was the first. For many people today, it's what they first drank because it's all that was available in single malts at one time, or it's even what their father drank. So they got used to it that way. But with that kind of success and almost ubiquity, there's a potential for people that are quite into single malts to start to look down on it. start to think, oh, yeah, it's everywhere. It's a big product. It's mass market, mass produced, all those kinds of things. But single malts can never really be mass produced. Obviously, there's some huge distilleries like Glenfiddich, Glenlivet, Macallan that produce huge volumes. But single malt is always, by necessity, produced in a batch process, right? It's got to go in and out of pot stills at least twice. It's always a batch process. And it is still a distillery that's family run. Glenfiddich's still a distillery that only uses water on site, do some bottling on site, age all the whiskies on site, which is all stuff that's very, very rare in the industry today. And I get that it's one of the more lighter, delicate single malts on the market, and often some people might come in and that's their first whiskey, and then they want to explore the peat monsters and the sherry bombs, and they get into all of that, and they start to think of Glenfiddich as something a bit meh, but it's not. I still go back to it regularly. Is Glenfiddich 12 my favorite whiskey? No. Will I happily drink it if served? Absolutely. And actually really like Glenfiddich 15. I think it's, in kind of modern core range whiskies, it's one of the best bang for buck whiskies out there. I've had a bit of it during lockdown.
You've drank all your stock you built up over the 5 years.
I've done a lot of damage, yeah.
Yeah. But I have a question for you. Obviously when I went to Scotland, it was Glenfiddich I was looking forward to go to. Even though, there's Glenfarclas, all of Islay, I was going to have a good look at. But Glenfiddich was almost like a pilgrimage. I remember getting into the car park, and I always had a sense that I've been here. You've seen the photos so many times. You go on the tour. It's just, And I remember doing their Pioneers tour, and I was the only one on the tour, and they almost canceled it. Yeah. But the guy said he looked up, or someone told him, obviously, that it's me and I've come, and they decided to let it go. And I got there, and the guy looked me in the eye, and he said, "It's all about you today. Just ask any questions you want, anything you want to see, anything you want to touch. Just very applicable. We'll let you through." And that was magical 4 hours. Event like that. There's so much to look at. It's just fascinating. Yeah.
That's a great tour. And I should point out to everyone listening that the Pioneers tour is not the regular tour, right? That's one, I think you pay £100 for that normally or something. And it's a 4-hour tour, and you get to taste some incredible stuff at the end. The regular tour, I think, I could be wrong, but I think it's around £10. It used to be free. When I started with them, it was free, but they found that they would just get bus loads of tourists, because the tour operators would just make sure everyone sees a few things, make sure they see a castle, make sure they see a distillery, right? So that just bring them by. There were people that never had any particular interest in whiskey. They'd come in for the free tour, because that's the tour operator can tick something off, and they've had them out of their hair for a couple of hours, right? And they've filled the day. As soon as they introduced a £10 fee, they still had the numbers. They still had people coming in, but they didn't have the time wasters. People were just trying to fill in a couple of hours. Balvenie, if you want to go to Balvenie, you do not just show up, right? It's right next to Glenfiddich. If you want to go on a tour, you book in advance, because otherwise there's almost no way you'll be getting a tour there. It's become really popular.
I haven't. I couldn't go to Balvenie because I just had a couple of days in Speyside, and kept moving on for. I think it was Balmore I had to get to on a certain date, and then I had my ferry already booked as well for Islay. But I remember going into this. There's a lot of stuff you and I can talk about and probably bore the shit out of everyone else. But I remember drinking the car sample. Towards the end of the tour, you can make your own bottle as well. I have it here somewhere, the little bottle, and it was so nice. And I said to the guy, why can't I pay you more and have the cask strength Glenfiddichs on a more regular basis? And obviously it was not for him to answer. He's doing the tours, but it's such a good spirit,
Andrew Durbidge, who I mentioned in connection to Scotch Malt Whisky Society, writes a blog called Whisky and Wisdom. And I remember at one point years ago, he wrote an article called something like The 3 Stages of Glenfiddich. and the stages are like it, hate it, love it. So people start drinking whiskey, they go, yeah, that's pretty good, and then they develop a antipathy for it. It's like, no, I like far more interesting stuff. And then, you know, they've had a few hundred whiskeys, they come around to it again and say, actually, it's light, but it's fairly interesting liquid, and it's well made. And then they actually develop a love for Glenfiddich. So, you know, when I used to get people saying, you know, Glenfiddich's a trash whiskey, I'd just say, yeah, I guess you're still in stage 2, but you'll be in stage 3 one day. And it was a nice way to not to shut them down, but to say, hang on, wait, what are you talking about? And then I'd tell them about, you know, a whiskey blogger wrote about these 3 stages, and you could see their minds starting to open up a little bit again. Say, well, maybe I've missed something. Maybe I should give it another shot.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, for me, I've actually never warmed up to the 15-year-old. I'm not saying that it's not a nice whiskey, but the 12 I'll drink in my sleep. You know, I think kind of like the Solera cask, there's probably a little bit of 12 always in my body, you know, because being from the Indian community, I've got any number of friends who have no interest in whiskey, but when I'm at their house, they put forward Glenfiddich 12 because it is, you know, for the non-drinker, it is it's the luxury brand, you know, it's up there, it's just above Johnny Black, you know, that it'd be shit. But it's actually the Glenfiddich 18 I still enjoy. I'll drink it any day of the week. It's just fantastic. Just leaves me wondering sometimes, you know, if I had it at a high ABV, but obviously it is a blend of sorts, or it's a marriage of several casks, so maybe it just works for them at that lower ABV.
What I always found was that people that like the 12 also tend to really love the 18. Other people, such as myself, lent more towards the 15. It's a very different style. The 18's really a grown up 12-year-old. They're made in pretty much the same way, same cask, just a little change in proportion. The main difference is 6 years. 15 Solera process, some virgin oak in there as well. Different style, bolder and sweeter. People who like the 15 tend to really like the 21, but you're on the other side, the 12 and the 18, which I totally understand. I'm on the other side. That's just different tastes. We've all got different tastes, and that's normal and natural. Otherwise, we'd all like exactly the same whiskey, and we'd never be able to get it because it'd be too expensive.
We'll run it out. I remember, I think it's warehouse number 1, where the Solera tanks are, and I climbed up to the big tank, and I asked the guy what would happen, you know, if I jumped in here. Does the whiskey have the same buoyancy, or less, or more than water? And he said, look, no doubt you will drown and die, but you'll die very happy.
Less buoyancy because it's less dense. You would sink fairly quickly. It'd be very hard to stay afloat.
I'm not
Warehouse 8. Warehouse 8, that is, with the Glenfiddich Solera. That's I once did a live tasting at a broadcast tasting live. It was in the morning in Scotland, but it was broadcast to 4 or 5 different bars across Southeast Asia, all at the same time. That was a lot of fun.
Right. Nice. And can I ask, what's the first distillery you got to visit in Scotland? Was it Glenfiddich or?
No, it wasn't actually. I went, you know, before I actually worked in whiskey at all. A friend of mine and I had kind of an interest, and he was in Sweden at the time, so we had a holiday. We met in Edinburgh and spent a week or so there, and then went back to stay at his place in Sweden. We visited 3 distilleries while I was there: Edredour, Glenfarclas, and Glenlivet. And you know, we kind of selected those. They were all convenient. One was very small, one was a bit medium, and one was quite large. So we thought that was a good selection. We were also with his partner, and she wasn't mad on going to 100 different distilleries, so we kept it a bit easy. Actually, I lie. We had a Glenord. We ended up dropping in at Glenord at the end as well.
Oh, right.
That was before Glen. That was. But that's a long time ago, before they went through expansion. Glenord Diageo,
Yeah. I don't think I've drunk a lot of Glenord, but also our friend Brendan is watching. He just made a comment that he remembers having similar conversation with you regarding cask strength whiskies. I think it's just like, you know, we all have our favorite distillery, but then we start to cheat on them with something else, and then we feel guilty, and then we start making excuses, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, look, for a lot of products, people tend to be quite loyal. I've never met a loyal single malt whiskey drinker. They might have their favorite, but they cheat on them in a heartbeat. Try and find a cigarette smoker who wants to buy another brand for a change. It doesn't happen.
Yeah. It's interesting. Actually, a recent customer of ours, Gary, is watching, and he messaged me the other day that I want 6 bottles, and he wants all of them to be Islay. And I almost tongue in cheek want to send him some Speyside peaty whiskies because there's some really good ones, or Highland, even the peaty Glentoran. I'm just like, I don't want to rock the boat. The man specifically asked for Islay Drams, but yeah.
You could have gone the other way and just given him some non-peated Islay and just messed with him.
Yeah. Oh no, he said. I'm pretty sure he said peated. I should maybe read his takes. But he's opened all the whiskies and he's enjoying them. Apparently, but so another subject of mine, which is very, very interesting to my heart, is independent bottles. This is
yeah. Okay.
Yeah. What's your thoughts? Something favorite or yeah?
I mean, it's getting hard to keep track, right? There used to be kind of, there's always been a lot of independent bottlers, but there used to kind of be a handful of main ones and then a bunch of other stuff. That, over the time I've been involved in whiskey, has just exploded. There's far more independent bottlers than there are distilleries. That's not a gripe about independent bottlings. I guess that's a little frustration, as it's so hard to keep up with everything that's out there now. Which is far better than how it used to be, where there were 10 bottles available in your local market, so that's what you bought. But yeah, there's just been this explosion in what's available, and some of it's very, very good. I think a lot of independent bottlers like to sneak through every 3rd or 4th bottle is really kind of trash, but there's some tremendous stuff out there. But I love independent bottlings as a concept is great because you might get something that's not particularly on that distillery style, but still really interesting. Something that they otherwise would have put into blending, right? So you get a fantastic different expression of the same distillery that you love or have always loved. Another downside is, if you find a bottle you love, chances are you won't be able to find it again. Sometimes that's a little bit heartbreaking. I think we've all been through that.
Yeah. Because my one problem at the moment with some of the indie bottlers who have become huge, who are probably releasing more whiskey than some of the smaller Scottish distilleries, is this massive wave of 43% indie bottlings, which is like there's no need for that. We already have the distilleries doing the standard or 10, 15, 18, and in my mind, an indie bottler, it's that cast trend. It's a raw expression. Sometimes a mad experiment. It's been recast into a French red wine cask or something like that. Yeah.
But look, Cadenhead's oldest independent bottler in the world. They do a lot of stuff that's at 43%, but lower ABV, but not their good single malts, right? They always do them at cask strength, or actually cask strength, because a lot of those are actually small batch. But then they do a lot of blends, blended malt, blended whiskies that they do at a lower strength, because I guess they want to hit that another part of the market, that kind of more daily drinking. People like you and me, we love to go to a bar, go somewhere new and different, and try something new at 55, maybe even 60%, and that's no issue for us. Not everyone in the world likes to drink at 55, 60% all the time. They might on occasion or never. So it is good for them to have those options. But I do hear what you're saying. I mean, we are getting a blurring of those lines between what you get from, official bottlers and independent bottlers. But official bottlers are blurring those lines too, right? By trying to put out single cask editions and cask strength editions. Is it a good thing or a bad thing? I think ultimately a good thing. More choice, but I get it does really blur the lines in a lot of ways. Samuel Holmes, he works for a local. He's the brand guy for local distillery Thompson. I don't know if you've heard of them. It's a Kiwi distillery. I haven't tried anything, but I have heard of it. Yeah.
That's a full shelf of Thompsons there. A young distillery Young Distillery. I support them a lot. They do some mad experiment stuff. But he's asked a question, if you can give some insight into the magic behind the curtain at Scotch Malt Whisky Society. And if you want to sort of dwell into that, or what were your experiences there? And then he's got another question, and I'll ask later.
Sure. Look, I actually once had the great pleasure of sitting on the tasting panel. Now, Scotch Malt Whisky Society has many casks in warehouses that they've bought over a long period of time. Some of them they buy and bottle fairly quickly. Most of them they buy and keep. They age them themselves in their own warehouses, right? Before they bottle anything, they have a process where they go through and they say, we'll have to try some of this, we'll try some of this. It all goes to a tasting panel. And I can't remember exactly, but I think there's like 6 to 8 people sit on that panel. I was in Scotland maybe eight and a half years ago, and I had a meeting with one of the people at the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, mainly because we talked to each other a lot, and it was just putting a face to a name. So I went and sat down with this gentleman, had a good chat, and then at the end he said, I was wondering if you favor, and I'm thinking, here, and I'm in his office, I'm not sure what kind of favor I can do him, but I said, sure, if I can help, happy to. He said, I'm supposed to sit on the tasting panel this evening now, but was it his wife had broken her ankle or something, and he said he wanted to get home and look after her. Could I take his spot on the tasting panel? Oh, this is you asking me for a favor. Sure. He's obviously doing me a favor. Of course, I had to call my wife quickly and let her know, because this was, in fact, we were in Scotland for our honeymoon, and she was off seeing a play by herself then. But she was actually okay with it. So I went into this tasting panel, sit down. Yeah, it was 6 people, including myself, and we were trying 8 whiskies. And they gave me a bit of a brief, which is normally we end up picking about half of them, approving half of them. But if we end up approving none, that's okay. If we end up approving all of them, that's okay. We don't have a target here, except is this good enough to bottle? The person I was meeting, Kai, had given me a bit of an introduction to the group and built me up nicely. And then I sat down, and as I was taking my first sip of the first whiskey, which was a fairly punchy little number, around 62%, I think, I was a bit nervous in this esteemed company. Someone asked me a question just as I was taking my first sip, and I turned to kind of answer, and it went down the wrong way. This is my first sip of cask strength whiskey in this room after I've been built up so nicely, and I start coughing and spluttering and trying to hold it back. So of course my eyes are going red and bulging as I'm going. I thought, these guys are going to think I'm a complete idiot. I can't even drink cask strength whiskey without choking on it. Yeah. But in the end, we approved. There were 3 of those whiskies that the panel really liked and definitely went through. There were 4 we didn't like, and there was one that they said split the panel because some people gave it 8s, some people gave it 4s. In the end, it was bottled because it was a really interesting bottle. It was a Lefroy. It had a really strange nature, soapy and tarry and greasy, which I love in a whiskey. But yeah, that's the process. They'll have an initial process to get those, and then the tasting panel sits down and says yes or no to each of them. Then each market that works with Scotch Malt Whisky Society gets to decide if they want them or not as well. So, yeah, I don't know if they have overall targets. Like Cadenheads are very proud of the fact that they don't have any targets at all and would happily bottle nothing if they thought nothing in a month if nothing was good enough. I suspect Scotch Malt Whisky Society is not quite so blasé about it, but certainly they're very strict with that quality control. Every panel has a poet on it, a poet or writer, because that's someone who helps put the tasting notes together. Was it Robin Lang has been one of them in the past? I believe Charles MacLean, I believe, but actually I don't know if that's public knowledge, so I won't mention him. But anyway, a satirical writer of whiskey, I believe, has been working on some of them.
Nice. That's very nice. But can I ask, when you say they didn't approve, what's happening there? Is the whiskey gone for long aging, or they've gone and sold the cask somewhere else now for blending, or maybe private collection, or they just let it age?
Honestly, that wasn't discussed, but they do have options, and I suspect there'll be recommendations around that. If it's a bit too young and harsh, then yes, it'll go for more aging. Otherwise, yeah, it could be sold off. It could be recast is another trick that's always available to people if their whiskey is not interesting enough. Just give it a finish in another cask and give it some more flavor and character, which I know some people are cynical about and don't like. My view is if it leads to tasty whiskey and you're transparent about it, that's fine.
Interesting. In your experience, like obviously you've been to a number of distilleries. Is there, because I already know my answer, but is there a particular distillery where you try to cast sample, which obviously you can't buy a bottle of, but that particular sample on that day from that cask, can you think back to something that was just magic and made you think, I need a bottle, but I can't have it?
Yeah, look, I've obviously been to a lot and had a lot of cask samples, but there was a lot of time while I was a Glenfiddich brand ambassador where we were in warehouses for various more educational things. And there was another particular brand ambassador whose name I won't mention to protect him, who used to love to run around and see if he could get bungs out of barrels and use his dipping dog to dip that in and have a little taste. And some of the very, very old, very, very unique, incredible stuff that we tasted in some of the warehouses, particularly like Warehouse 8, where they do the Glenfiddich Solera 15-year-old. Yeah, stunning stuff. Aberfeldy, one of the best whiskey tours I ever did. We had an incredible cask sample there as well. Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah, I mean, nothing else particularly sticks out in my mind, but yeah, most of the really incredible stuff I've done has been outside of warehouses.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it was a particular bourbon cask sample at Beaumont that just magic. And I think for first time, it kind of forced me to go pursue more long-aged bourbon cask whiskey.
Yeah.
Specific single cask bourbon and a cask strength. And it had, luckily, there's many. And I've been finding some amazing drams, and they're so beautiful. The depth, the sweetness, the oak as well. It's amazing because the sherry bomb is a term thrown around quite a bit and pursued.
Yeah.
But I reckon almost a bourbon bomb doesn't sound as well. So it sounds like a dirty bomb. The Americans are drop, but
yeah. And look, there are distilleries that I think do better in bourbon barrels. I've always thought that about Glenfiddich. Obviously, there's exceptions, but Glenfiddich's generally better from a bourbon barrel or vatted. Pure sherry cask expressions. Yes, I've had some amazing ones, but most of them, to me, I prefer the bourbon stuff, and I think that works the opposite way. I've had some Glendronach from bourbon barrels, and that's tasty. But what they do best is the sherry stuff. But I don't know. Some people might find this controversial, but I've said it before, and I've been fairly open about it. I think sherry cask whiskey today is quite overrated, because I think a lot of the people get excited about it, say, "Oh, look at this! It's this percentage, and look at this color. It's so sherry. It's going to be amazing." And then they taste it and say, "Oh, this is wonderful." And I taste it. I say, "It's hot. It's tannic. It's sulfurous. There's no lovely sweet fruit." I think some people just have this machismo and bravado about whiskey that is, if it's strong and it's punchy on sherry, then it's a good whiskey. And I don't agree, because I've had some incredible sherry whiskies, particularly older ones. By older, I mean older bottlings, not older in age statement.
Yeah.
And the sherries of today rarely get close. There are some good ones, but it's just not the same as it used to be. And I don't get excited if someone pulls out their 60% sherry bomb. And sure, I'll give it a taste, but it's often disappointing to me. So yeah,
well, I think it's
modern sherry cask whiskey.
It's interesting because I mean, a lot of people like I'm a big fan of Aberlour Urbana, and I collect them. I've got some older batches, and I've been lucky to try some really, really old batches, and they're just beautiful. Where the new ones, they're fine. They're good value for people, and you recommend them to the customers because that's what they want. But Caden had released some Glenrothes 22-year-old, and it was just. But again, you can't convince people because at the same time they want a good experience, but they're thinking about dollars as well. Like the question almost starts of what's the best sherry bomb I can get for. You still there, Matthew?
Yeah, I'm still here. I can still hear you. My computer seems to do this, so I just have to hit start cam again, and I should be better. There we go.
There you are. But like the question starts with, what's the best sherry bomb I can get for under $100? And it's just like, I think we can lose the bomb part, but we can find you something nice sherry.
Yeah.
And I also agree with the newer, real punchy upfront sherry young whiskies, but they don't have that sweetness, that raisin that we've enjoyed. It almost has a like a slight bitterness of some sort.
It can be really tannic. Yeah. I'm glad you bring up Abellaro Bunard, because I remember on one of the Facebook forums a while ago that someone was saying, does anyone else think that the Abunards are not as good as they used to be? And I said, yeah, absolutely. I feel that. Which, what was the turning point for you? And he said, oh, around batch 40 something. Like, I'm at home looking at my computer. I laughed out loud because I stopped drinking it around batch 22.
Wow.
I mean, I still had some. I've still had some since then, but I used to try and get as many as I could. I make sure I got every batch for a long, long time. But sorry, around batch 23, I kind of gave up. Not because they weren't good, just because the ones before that were so much better. Batches 9 and 15 particularly stand out in my memory as being fantastic whiskies.
But I think, yeah, it's just, it's just from strictly a consumer point of view. What else do you drink really then? Because you want to stick to a budget, like in Kiwi dollars. And Kiwi dollars is very similar to Singapore dollar. Like the Abunard retails for anywhere between $100 to $130, depending on which batch number and how much you're.
It wouldn't here. I mean, obviously we've got much higher taxes and much higher other costs in Singapore. We've got one of the highest taxes in the world, not the highest, but then storage and transport and rent is also very expensive in Singapore. So the final price of spirits here is pretty high. You're not getting an Abunard for $120, that's for sure. Unless you're in tight with a wholesaler or something.
Philip Lutring, he's watching and he's commenting. He scored many a bottle of Abunard at $100 for me. And he enjoys them. Yeah, obviously.
Maybe there, but not here, not at that price.
Right. Well, for all the 18 people who are watching, I'll look after you, or I try to when I can. Samuel had a second question for you, which was around if you can expand a bit around your work or experience with your chemistry background around to the molecule. Yeah, please. Yeah.
So something in my bio is a little bit misleading. It says I studied chemistry at the University of Western Australia, and that is 100% true. I did, but it's not meant to imply that I graduated. I ended up dropping out of chemistry. All through school, even high school, I'm like, I want to be a scientist. I love this. When you get into university, and I realized that most science is actually not learning about cool stuff, but standing in a lab coat with latex gloves on and glasses and measuring things in pipettes and taking copious notes, I realized this is really not something I want to do. I'm still very interested in science and still read a lot about science. I'm more interested in the results than the doing it.
Yeah.
So ended up dropping out of science, and promptly forgot a lot of what I learned in chemistry until I started to get into whiskey again, and I started learning about things like lipid bilayers. What happens when you add water to non-chill filtered whiskey? Why does it go cloudy? And it's all to do with lipids, and it's stuff that's straight from biochemistry. And then where does flavor come from in whiskey? I do have an analytical mind, right? I don't like being stuck in labs where everything smells funny. But I do have an analytical mind. I do a lot of research about whiskey, and I've read up a lot on the chemistry of whiskey for what's actually available. And there's all kinds of different complex reactions that go on in different stages of production, not just maturation, but obviously it's huge in maturation, to produce the different flavors and aromas we get in whiskey. I know not everyone shares this passion. Some people just want to drink it and say, this tastes good. Great, I get that, understand that. Not for me. A great part of the joy for me is understanding, why does it taste like this? Why are there peated whiskies that taste completely different? Stuff like that. And there's different kinds of phenols. There's different kinds of chemical reactions that go on. There's different structures with different aromas and flavors. Esters produced in casks, which are a mixture of acids and alcohols. So acids react with alcohols to produce esters. Acids come about through oxidations of other things, slow oxidation as the cask is aging. So there's stuff you get through aging that you just can't get through any other point in the production. I love this. This is not, I've never worked in the chemistry of whiskey. Yeah, I've been fortunate enough to have a good half-day long tour at Scotch Whisky Research Institute and went through a lot of really geeky, interesting stuff there. I love that stuff. But no, I haven't actually worked in it. That comes up more in my writing about whiskey, which I do at Whiskey Molecules on Facebook. That's where I do a lot of writing about whiskey, but that's where all the really geeky stuff goes, straight to Whiskey Molecules. It's fun for me. That might be bizarre to some people, but I find it fun.
Yeah. And speaking of writing, you're working on a book?
I am, yeah. I mean, and everyone else, right? I know you've written a book, which I still haven't read, but I'm excited to get my hands on that. But I'll also be asking you for some tips. I got to find a publisher, but been working through it. And for people that have read a lot of what I've written, you'll see a lot of the same stuff. I'm writing new stuff as well, but it's going to be a fairly anthologic type book. I'm going to pull together my different writings, so I'm putting a nice structure around it. Where I'm up to around 60,000 words. It's probably going to get to around 65 before I start editing back. It's a bit verbose in points, but I imagine it's going to be 55, 60,000 words. I've lined up an illustrator. I'm trying to nail down a publisher. But yeah, hopefully that comes out, let's see, towards the end of this year. I'd be happy with that.
Okay. That long, really? Wow.
That long?
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, look, my book, I like to think my books is actually not a book. It's almost kind of, in my book, I talk about how the idea for it came from my Instagram handle. You know, it's just like, you know, I did so much in 2019. It'd be good to retell some of the stuff, because on social media, you only say so much or can so much. But I kind of shared an interesting whiskey moment from each month. And one month I had to share two because it was just chocker with so much fun stuff. But I've been looking forward to your book, because I would see it being more technical, you know, and obviously with the experiences around working directly with Glenfiddich and all these other big bars and restaurants and different brand ambassadors you've been around. I would see it be a lot more technical.
Look, my strength in tasting notes has never been writing these lovely evocative descriptions of drams or of distilleries or places. I think my strength has always been taking that fairly technical, detailed stuff and explaining it fairly simply. That's what I've always tried to do at Whiskey Molecules. Sometimes I succeed and sometimes don't, but that's going to be the effort. Some of it's going to be a little bit more mundane, but yeah, there's going to be some complex stuff in there that I'm explaining as simply as possible, without dumbing it down. You know, just trying to make it understandable and approachable, but not basic.
Yeah. And there's whiskey being made in Singapore now and aged in Singapore.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, to say there is whiskey being made and aged in Singapore might be overselling it a little. But I mean, we're all still very excited about it. There is a little gin distillery in Singapore. There's a couple, but one of them worked very, very hard recently to actually produce a cask worth of single malt spirit. Which a bit more actually, which has gone into a cask and is starting to age, and kind of as expected because of climate, it's actually moving along quite quickly. But we're all really looking forward to getting our hands on some of that.
What are these guys called?
So the distillery is called Brass Lion.
Okay. And that's obviously a gin distillery, but they've sort of dabbled into whiskey a little.
Yeah, and look, it's not what they do, right? It was a tremendous amount of work for them because they've got fairly small stills. So they had to do many batches just to produce enough spirit for one cask, to fill one bourbon cask. So it's definitely not going to be a regular offering from them. But it's cool. Singapore's first single malt whiskey. They've done it all properly. Meets almost all the rules for Scotch single malt, obviously not in Scotland, but almost exactly to that standard. I mean, they didn't do some of the stuff on site as would be required in Scotland, but other than that, legit 100% the real thing. We just got to wait a bit longer for it to age.
Yeah.
And if anyone's thinking, oh, that's fantastic, I want to get in on that, yeah, it's probably going to sell out in the local market in a matter of minutes when it's available.
And I would hate to imagine how many zeros or how many digits will be involved. It being Singapore, it is the millionaires' playground.
Yeah, look, I don't think they'll go nuts with it. I don't think it'll be cheap. If it was me, I'd be pricing it around a few $100 a bottle.
Yeah,
because I think I can get that quite easily. It was a lot of work for them to set up. They spent months and months talking to the government about the rules and how they would apply, because the government had no idea, because no one ages spirits in Singapore. So it actually took them a long time and a lot of effort and meetings to get this to actually work in the first place.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the Southeast Asia, including Australia, New Zealand whiskey, transits probably through Singapore. But yeah, you're right. The aging is, I mean, the closest point of reference would be Taiwan, but they're quite a lot north to you guys, I think.
I've been to Kavala, and they still have definite seasons. It's warm. There's no doubt it's warm. Certainly was when I was there. But they do have seasons. It's not just warm all the time. It's a bit of up and down there. Yeah.
Brendan's just dropped a whole heap of technical stuff about Brass Lion. He's a nerd. He's a proper nerd.
He is. I mean, there's some great notes, and he's probably talked about the Marisota barley they used and the yeast they've used and all that other kind of stuff. We do have all those notes. We all diligently wrote it down. He's got it on hand. I'd have to look it up.
Yeah. A good friend of mine, David's asked about the whiskey stones. Do you think if there's any molecular dilution or what other flavored or concentration influences happening? From
whiskey stones themselves?
Yeah.
So I think whiskey stones are stupid. I'll just come out and say that. I haven't always thought this, but the more I think about it, the more I think that we're on the same page, are we? Okay.
I'll take your money, buy them off us, but they do nothing. Yeah.
All right. All the other stuff aside, right? The fact that they're porous and difficult to clean. If you swirl them in your glass, they're going to scratch the sides. The fact that often if you've got ice in your whiskey and you tip your head back, sometimes the ice just all falls down at once and crashes into your teeth. That, but with stone. But let's put all that aside and look at what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to cool your whiskey. Stone is bad at transferring heat. So it's pointless. It's absolutely pointless. The stainless steel ones, they're bad for lots of reasons, but at least they're good at transferring heat. So at least they will cool your whiskey at a fairly good rate. Still not as good as ice, because the miracle of ice is that as it cools your whiskey, the outside layer melts off, so you get to the cooler bit inside, right? So they're really, really effective at reducing the temperature of your whiskey. Not that I'm saying you should want to necessarily reduce the temperature of your whiskey, but if that's what you want to do. The stones, also stainless steel is pretty much inert, right? Ice is obviously not inert. It's going to put water in your whiskey, but we're used to putting water in our whiskey. Stone, whatever stone it is not inert, right? It does react. It does change. There are acids in whiskeys, and these are going to eat away at the stone. And I don't think that's going to make a massive, massive change. But it can't be zero. There's no way it can be zero. It is putting something into your whiskey. That's not going to be anything harmful, I would say, but you're probably getting some extra mineral content in there. Whether that's measurable even, I don't know. You probably need sophisticated equipment to measure that difference. It's going to be a very small amount, but it can't be zero. There's just no way.
It was actually, it might have been actually David. And David is like you. He loves this technical stuff. He's very well read, very well traveled as well, like you. It might have been him telling me the story how the concept of stones came. These guys, they are living in the valleys or whatever, and they would just go down to the stream or the river and pick up a cool couple of rocks from the riverbed and chuck it into the glass. I don't know if that actually happens or he might have witnessed it, but that kind of made sense, you know, as in. But
maybe that's happened in isolated parts. But if you're taking these round stones out of the river, that'd be better than these cut cubes for a start.
Yeah.
They would have very smooth sides. They will have been leached and smoothed along the way. And they're probably coming out of the same water that they're putting into the whiskey as well.
Right.
I suspect that story may be either a very, very isolated case or a little bit made up, because I mean that's a lot of effort to cool your whiskey. And where are they doing this?
I'm not sure.
Is this
David? I guess. Yeah.
I mean, if this was in Scotland, I would think you know, cooling whiskey was never a thing traditionally. If it was America, maybe in the South where it's a bit warmer, but that might be one of those nice romantic stories where there might be an example of it happening, but it's never really been a mainstream practice.
Yeah. And speaking of, I mean, I did a YouTube video specifically around ice or no ice. I still haven't done what's the optimal temperature to drink your whiskey, you know, because I mean, I don't know. Have you seen this glass before, that Denver Lilly?
I have, I've got one. Yeah.
I use it quite a bit. Otherwise, obviously, Glencairn. And I always say to the guys during tasting, you know, just hold your glass as tight as you can, warm it up a little, so it will start to open up a little bit. The smells and flavors will come a lot more readily. Versus, but you are in a very humid, warm setup, you know, over all of the country.
Look, it's a joke I do at tastings a lot. I say if you ask a Scotsman, you know, what temperature should you drink a good single malt whiskey, they'll say room temperature. Singaporean room temperature and Scottish room temperature are not the same thing. It does tend to be significantly warmer here.
Yeah.
What is the optimum temperature? I don't like whiskey with ice. Actually, that's not fair. I often drink whiskey with ice in a highball, right? That's not when I'm actually trying to taste the whiskey and think about the whiskey. That's just that's kind of a replacement for beer for me, in a sense. If I want to taste the whiskey, I don't want my whiskey to be cold, because one thing I can say with certainty is that temperature changes how flavors and aromas will express. One easy example that a lot of people kind of understand fairly intuitively is that you don't get as much sweetness at lower temperatures. So, I mean, think of ice cream. Main thing about ice cream is it's cold. It's got this lovely texture. It doesn't taste that sweet, right? You let it melt in your bowl and then taste it. It's incredibly sweet. As it gets warmer, the sweetness is expressed more. People that make cocktails understand this really well, because they've got to adjust the level of sweetness in the cocktail according to how, you know, the stirring it on the ice to cool it down, or that kind of thing. And they know that as the temperature changes, that's going to change. And this is true of whiskey. I used to find Glenfiddich 12, you know, we talked about it earlier. Nice whiskey, but if you put a lot of ice in it, just 1 or 2 pieces to cool it a little, fine. You put a lot of ice in it, make it cold. I always found you lost the fruitiness, and all you were left with was the oakiness. So the fruitiness being on the sweeter side tends to be suppressed, and you're just left with these tannic, oaky notes. And that left it flat, dull, and bitter for me. Now, other people might disagree. That's opinion. But what I can tell you is different flavors express better at different temperatures. So if we're going to ask ourselves what's the optimum temperature, I think that's very hard to say that there's this perfect whiskey drinking temperature. But I can tell you that the people that choose the cask, you know, your malt masters, your master distillers that are choosing casks and putting them together to create the best whiskey they can make, are probably doing it in a room of around 20, 22 degrees. So that's how they got the best whiskey they could get. You might like it at a different temperature, but really they must have been operating maybe a bit cooler. I don't know. What's the standard temperature that they heat or cool a room to in Scotland? It's probably around there, around 20 degrees. So that's got to be where whiskey's good. If you're coming in from a hot day outside, I don't mind a little bit of ice to cool it a little, right? Particularly if I'm hot, the bottle's hot because the bar's only just switched on their aircon or whatever. But yeah, I don't like a lot of ice. I don't like my whiskey to be cold.
Can I add in there, if you would agree or disagree with me, is there are times when we're drinking for flavors and smells, you know, which luckily for you and me is often. But there are times when people are drinking it as a refreshment because You know, we don't drink cognac, and like I don't drink cognac, rum. There's any number of spirits I never drink. I'll try it, but if I want a refreshing drink, loads of ice and water, but then I wouldn't be doing that to Highland Park 18 or something of that value. I'll be getting a Johnny Black or a Chivas 12, you know. Yeah,
absolutely, and that to me is drinking occasion. But I mean, these points are all predicated on the idea that you want to taste the dram, you want to taste the whiskey, right? You want to be able to think about it, nose it, talk about it, share it with friends, and have a conversation about it. If you just want a refreshment, then all these rules are, well, they were never rules in the first place. This can all be put aside, right? I can't be too much of a purist if I'm sitting here drinking a highball while you're having drams, right? It's hot and it's now 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I don't want to get onto the drams just yet. But I'm not going to go this, excuse me, this Bellican I'm having. I'm not going to go and write tasting notes based on having had it in a highball. This is just something nice, cold, and fresh that I can enjoy on this warm afternoon. I'm not thinking about it. I mean, I'm thinking about whether I enjoy it or not, but that's not representative of the whiskey.
Yeah. One of the evenings when I was at the Tokyo Whiskey Library, you know, I always sat at the bar up front because I wanted to talk to the barman or this lovely lady who I saw twice, I think, there. And you could, I mean, it's Tokyo, right? You can tell people with money, you know, they walk in, there's like a halo around the head, and they came and said, the gentleman sat down next to me, and I had spent like half an hour choosing my next dram and obviously watching the dollar or the signs at the end. And this guy ordered 3 drams from 70s, you know, and he had all of them made into highballs. And I was just like, I had so many questions, but obviously I wasn't going to bother him. You know, it's his way, it's his money. You know, he's ordering $200, $300, $400 US dollar drams, and he's just having them manage a highball. I'm just like, just why, you know? But
look, I mean, the first rule of whiskey is it's your whiskey. You drink it however you want. I mean, a highball, I mean, at least it's not a whiskey sour, right? Because then or whiskey and Coke, because then you're completely killing not the kind of whiskey-ish character to it, but you're killing all the subtleties. Some of those subtleties are still going to express through simple ice and soda. Not all of them, obviously, but some. But yeah, I would never put anything in a whiskey, you know, a whiskey that was bottled in the 70s, distilled in the 70s, bottled in the 80s, kind of thing. You know, $200, $400 a dram. Never. At most, and this is also quite unlikely, at most a drop or two of water.
Yeah, just to help it relax and just open up a little.
Yeah, but I'd drink some of it first, and if I wasn't loving it, then I'd try a bit of water to see if it improved for me. But I generally like them without the water. It's only if I don't think it's great at first that I'll try the water to see if we can get a bit more out of it. Generally not, but that's just opinion, not fact.
Yeah, I had a bottle here. It's disappeared. Teeling has released in New Zealand only single cask. I think I've taken it to the shop. They've released a single cask whiskey aged in an ex-Pinot Noir red wine cask from New Zealand. So a strong Kiwi connection. And I actually struggled with that. It's bottled at 58%. And I had to cut it with quite a lot of water, actually, to get the sort of that rich, ripe plum, you know, blackberry sort of character. Before that, actually, it's here. I found it. It was just this one here.
Yeah.
So 14-year-old, and
nice.
So obviously the colors come from the red wine cask.
Yeah. Firstly, I'll say Teeling do some amazing stuff. I've got some friends there like Martin Lynch. If you're watching, I doubt it, but hey, Martin. They do some really good stuff. But like I was talking about before, with, you know, how I think a lot of modern sherried whiskey is just a bit too hot and obnoxious. I kind of agree with you. I have a sweet spot, I think, for kind of the best ABV of whiskey. And of course, there's exceptions, but generally 45 to 55 is where you get the best whiskeys, maybe even 54. A lot of it above that, I find it not bad, but very closed. And I think a lot of people will be familiar with this idea that if you're going into a bar and you're looking at the different whiskeys, and sometimes you ask if you can smell something, right? Nose it, they pull the cork out of the bottle for you and you have a sniff. If you're doing that with high ABV stuff, you rarely get anything. partly that's because of the narrow neck, but on the 40-43% stuff, you can still get quite a bit. The high ABV in the bottle really closes off aroma, because aroma is more closed at higher ABV. And aroma is an important part of taste. You know, we only taste those basic 5 or 6 things, but a lot of it comes from aroma. If that's closed off, we're not getting as much out of the whiskey, just heat from the alcohol. And if you like heat from the alcohol, great. I used to seek out, 65%, amazing. I definitely want one of those. Now I'm thinking, but is it a good whiskey? Is it really? I want a lot of reassurance before I go for it, because I've been disappointed by them so many times now. If you're between 45 and 55%, I'm usually pretty confident that it's going to have a nice level of bite from the alcohol to it, and a nice balance of flavor as well.
Yeah.
So I don't need my whiskey to be super punchy in alcohol anymore.
Yeah. I've recently tried a 5-year-old Bunnahabhain from Cadenhead, and there was a lot of fighting going on. It was just spirit. And then after I fought with it for a while, there was a little bit of honey started to come through, but I don't know why they decided to bottle that. It's they must have had their reasons. You
know what? But every now and then we can like things that we don't like at another time. We can enjoy them more at one time than we do at another. Different climate. Person tasting it might have had something else different beforehand. What they ate or drank just before that could affect their experience of it as well. There's so many things that can affect our experience of it. But look, low age statements never bother me. They never turn me away. But again, I find my sweet spot for age is from mid-teens to mid-20s. That's where most of my best whiskies ever have been, in that age range.
Cool. So everyone who I've had as a guest on this sort of chat over Dram, towards the end, we'll do this little section where I get to ask you 3 questions, and in return, you get to ask me one. That's all right. It won't be anything personal. Just to wrap up the conversation. All right. Question number 1 for you. Now that I know you're a free agent and you can speak your mind freely, what's your favorite distillery, if you had to pick one, irrespective of age, ABV, how long they've been open, but just one distillery you just want to try more expressions from?
This could well be a different answer in 3-6 months' time, right? But at the moment, the answer is Springbank. Springbank, I think they do incredible stuff. I did a poll on Dramful in Singapore a while ago, just asking people what they thought the best modern core range whiskey is. So no vintage bottlings, none of the special releases or anything, just modern core range. And I think about half the people picked Springbank, and I was one of them. Glendronach, Balvenie, Bunnahabhain did well, but Springbank for me. That's not easy, and that in a different mood I could give a different answer, but for now I'm going to say that Springbank.
Yeah, perfect. Question number 2: in your mind, does an age statement on a whiskey is important to you, or are you more interested in how well constructed either the single cask it might be, or it could be a marriage of few casks? What's more important to you?
As a general rule, I'm a big believer in transparency. I'd like all this information to be on the bottle, right? A lot of people have big issues with things like caramel coloring and chill filtration. I don't really. It's about the end experience of the whiskey, to be honest. But I would like to see them listed on the bottle. So in that sense, it is kind of important to me. I would like to see an age statement listed on the bottle. I get why people don't want to do that sometimes, because the industry made this bed for itself to lie in. They used to talk about how age matters and the older the better and all that kind of stuff, which is not necessarily true. But now they've basically told people that young whiskey should be cheap. So if it's 3, 4, 5 years old, they don't want to write that on the bottle. I get that, but I would like that information to be there. I think that's important. But all of that's secondary to what does the whiskey actually taste like. I'm not going to buy something because it's a certain age or because it's a certain region because of these reasons. I'm going to buy it because I want to drink it and because it tastes good. Well, a second time, right? but simply transparency. The information should be there. I think that is important.
That's good. That's very good. The last question is, what's one person, past or present, you haven't met yet, who you admire? Could be a historical figure or someone in the industry or someone not related to whiskey that you would like to have a sit-down session with and talk over a few drams.
You know, I don't think you'd have a much better time than going out for a few pints and drams with Robbie Burns.
Right.
He was a big drinker. He was a bit of a philanderer. He had a way with words. I think he'd be great for banter at the bar, right? That would be a lot of fun. I think you'd have a great night out with that man.
Do you think you would understand him? Because I mean,
yeah, but look, some of his stuff is written in very kind of thick Scottish dialect, but some of it's written in kind of very British English as well. And you know, if I can get through your accent, I should be okay.
Well, there you go. But Robbie Burns, we had a Burns night at my house for the first time. I don't host people at my house often because they abuse this temple. They drink.
I don't blame them, man. Look at that stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, and they add stuff to whiskey that, you know, I mean,
okay.
It's just like, do it in your house, don't do it in my house. But we had a Burns night. We did a Burns poker and cigar combined into one, and the deal was, you can come to my house, drink as much whiskey as you want. There's lots of meat, but everyone has to share a poem. And it was almost as a switch went off towards the end of the night, and everyone went so deep. You know, like guys shared some stuff which I didn't know, and I've known some of these guys for a long time. You know, it was good. And Robbie Burns, you know, his legend helps us sort of make that connection, I guess. You know, and as blokes, we don't talk about our feelings as much as we probably should be. But it was quite good. It was a great experience. I don't know if you guys do Burns nights there, but yeah.
There's a few brands have done them before. I did one a while ago, a couple of years ago, but it was fairly short notice and there were some big clashes, so it wasn't very well attended. Well, it was very well attended by the poetry people, but not many whiskey people came. But yeah, I would like to do that a little more regularly. Didn't do one this year, but maybe next year we should really focus on that and get something good and fun and meaningful with community. I mean, I love that story you just shared. It's great that actually brought something out in people that wouldn't otherwise happen. I mean, that probably wasn't the intended purpose. You were just there for a bit of whiskey and fun, right? A bit of banter and what have you. But it led to something more meaningful. I think that's fantastic. Whiskey, not always, but sometimes does that. I think that's beautiful.
Yeah. We actually had a policeman there who was a friend of another policeman friend of mine. And he wasn't even drinking, but as soon as it came to his turn, he was ready to go. He said he'd been writing for years. I was like, wow, we didn't know this about you. You know, it was good. It was magical. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, how often do guys get invited to poetry readings? Not very often.
No, not outside, because apparently we have no feelings. We just carry on, you know. Or mean. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. Just before you get to ask me a question, can we please talk a little bit about Dramful? Or if you can.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, I started that in Singapore with a couple of friends just because, it's going to sound terrible, but one of those guys said he wanted to meet more girls in whiskey and he wasn't meeting any of them. So we said, okay, let's set up a whiskey community on Facebook. There aren't any. He never met any girls through that either. He just doesn't meet girls. That's his problem, I guess. But then we had Nathan Titien from Perth come and visit Singapore at one point. We'd never met him before, but he came to this when I was working at Old Alliance. He came to the bar, got to know him. He said, can I set it up in Perth? We said, great. And then we just started setting up more of them. And, you know, we're now a network of whiskey groups with 20,000 members. Although they're a bit more divided than if we look at things like Scotch Addicts or Malt Maniacs, it's still together one of the biggest. Bigger than Malt Maniacs and a bit smaller than Scotch Addicts and smaller than Scotch Addicts, I think. But that's been incredible. I've met so many people in different parts of the world through that, you know, through the conversations and through other people who have been, particularly people who have joined us as admins and stuff like that. It's great. Community is very important to me in whiskey. As much as I love whiskey, it's always better shared with people who also appreciate it. That's where a lot of the joy of it comes from. And Dramful has helped me to do that, to meet more people into whiskey, to learn things, to give me an audience for questions and ideas as well. I could have just joined another community, but they weren't so common at the time. We wanted something local.
Well, I think that's the key word, Matthew, local, because I mean, I'm in every group you can imagine. But some of those 20, 30,000 people groups I struggle with because I can't sort of lay my eyes on anything, and I can't follow anyone in particular because there's blood up at every hour of night around the globe. But for us, I mean, I followed the Singapore, Aussie, I think it's Sydney and Melbourne, and then obviously the New Zealand one, and they all have under 3,000 people. So you can sort of follow some of the guys' opinions on a regular basis without sort of getting drowned. Yeah.
Look, we did find in Australia we had a different group in each city, and that was a little bit too local because we couldn't really get the volume of engagement to sustain a group. So we have closed a couple of them. And we turned Perth into Australia, and we've merged some groups into that. We'll see how far we go with that. But that should take it up to a good medium-sized group, maybe around the 4 or 5K mark. I don't know, but I don't want to be another 20K group because as you say, you can kind of get lost in those. And sometimes the admins can't keep up. You have these big fights and stuff as well, which we don't want. We've never wanted.
Yeah, I love the fights. The fights I've seen mostly is around ice and water, and then you see the comments, and then you see everyone's got an opinion, which is good because everyone's right. There's no wrong, but people will post picture. Like the easiest thing you can do is post a picture with a $200 plus bottle, which has been poured into a glass with a big ice cube, and you watch some of these purists come along and annihilate, and then everyone else defends themselves. I
mean, I enjoy kind of semi-trolling those groups, not trolling, but just going there for humorous responses from time to time. Anytime anyone misspells Ardbeg as Ardbeg, which happens a lot, I have a doctored picture of Ardbeg Distillery that's actually changed the name on the front to Ardbeg, so I just post that every time.
Nice.
Some people get the message. Yeah, there's no. Those are big forums. There's no community in there. Dramful's supposed to be more about the community.
Yeah.
And that's every group actually has a different style.
Yeah. Agreed. Right. Well, you get to ask me a question now.
Yeah. So let's not quite unlimited, but let's say you had say £5 million at your disposal to build a distillery. Where are you going to build it? What's your style? What do you actually want to do with this £5 million? What kind of whiskey are you going to make?
It will be on Jura, without a doubt. When you get to read my book, I don't want to spoil it for you. It features in it towards the end. I think there's a part of my soul on Jura. I love the other, I love the whiskeys from there. But if I had a free reign, there'd be a distillery on Jura that would be exclusively making peated single malt, exclusively being aged in sherry casks, and specifically Oloroso sherry casks.
That old style peat and sweet, yeah.
If you don't want it, it's okay. There's just more for, purists like us. We'll drink it all day, and the less we sell, the longer it can age for, and that's even better. Yeah,
that's it.
But I don't know if 5 million people gets you anything on Jura in terms of movement, but yeah.
I did once ask one of the guys in charge of all the expansion plans at Glenfiddich. He didn't quite answer the question, but I said, "What do you think it would cost to build this today? If you were starting from scratch and you had to build Glenfiddich today, what do you think it would cost?" He said, and his general answer was he would expect it would cost. And this wasn't specific to Glenfiddich, just generally, he felt £5 million would get you 1 million litres, 1 million litres per annum of pure alcohol, which is a relatively small distillery, but still bigger than others in Scotland.
Wow,
Glenfiddich was producing
a lot of investment.
Yeah, Glenfiddich was. I think you could probably do it cheaper, but to build it in the way Glenfiddich was built, but yeah, looking at Glenfiddich, which was 13 million litres per annum at that time, has expanded since. That meant a 65 million pound investment, which is enormous. So yeah, I work on, yeah, if you're building in the UK, 5 million pounds for 1 million litres per annum.
Well, that's a lot of money. Actually, I don't know if you understand the term publican, someone who owns a bar or a tavern. You don't understand a tavern. I was drinking a pint of Guinness with him after the lockdown, and he raised this question, why anyone with any amount of brain or business acumen would start a distillery. There's no real money coming in for a number of years where you could do at the least gin, because gin is the go-to spirit at the moment. But
look, it's a odd business model, isn't it? Going to the bank, say, I want this amount of money, I want to build this distillery. Great, your repayments will be this. Say, oh no, I'm not paying you for 5 years.
Yeah. I just want to acknowledge, I don't know if you're still watching, Nigel Brown. He was working at the Kalila distillery when I visited, and he gave me a great tour. Gave me a try of some amazing chocolates as well, actually. The first time I opened my eyes up to chocolate and whiskey together.
Came out really well.
Oh yeah, beautiful. Yeah, really, really good, and he's a good man. I've been actually fashioning his Kalila real woolly beanie because it's been so cold here last 4 or 5 days. But yeah. Anything else you want to cover, Matthew? I've taken a lot more of your time than I intended.
That's all right. I'll just share a story of a chocolate I had with whiskey one time. I had done some work with this guy in Malaysia for an event, whiskey and chocolate pairing, because this guy was a chocolatier and he did the whole bean to bar thing. So he actually has a farm where he grows the cacao trees and does everything and does retail sales of his own chocolate. I went out and had a look at he told me the whole process, and he turned out to be a complete geek as well. And we went through the chocolate making process and the whiskey making process in huge detail. And we found there's a lot of similarities between them. One of which is this kind of fermentation stage. So I ended up getting some Glenfiddich casks, finished and kind of used up casks, sent to his chocolate farm for the fermentation stage of the cacao pods, because apparently the type of wood you use can affect the flavor of the chocolate,
right?
The final chocolate, right? Probably microbiota and tannins and what have you getting into the chocolate. And he ended up making some truffle chocolates with stuff that had been made in these Glenfiddich casks, in whiskey casks. And we believe this is a world cask. We know that cacao nubs have been aged in them, but not the fermentation stage being done in casks before. And we ended up having this truffle paired with Glenfiddich 18, and it gave the most incredible, long, complex, involved finish you've ever had on a whiskey and chocolate pairing, or any food and whiskey pairing. Yeah, if you're ever going to Malaysia, I'll see if I can hook you up with the guy and see if you can get some of those, if he's still making it. But it was really, really incredible stuff. So,
yeah. Well, I mean, the thing I liked about the Glenfiddich 18 is that sort of dry hazelnut almond. I don't want to say biscuity, because biscuity is also cereal, and but it has this beautiful dry fruit character which lingers for a long time, even though it's a lower ABV. Yeah,
it's a good balance with the 20% sherry content. Yeah. I mean, I recently acquired an older miniature of the Glenfiddich 18, and it was just gorgeous. And I would like to think it's a lot better than what we get now in the bottle, but I'm sure maybe it's the same. It wasn't all that old, but yeah. Who knows? We'll have to do a side by side to work that out.
Yeah, definitely. But the thing is, I've invited myself to the Singapore, the single cask bar, but then the whole COVID situation has unfolded. Who knows when I can leave New Zealand, because I was meant to go to Scotland as well again on a grand tour, but I don't see that happening now. But
No time soon. But if when you do finally get back to Singapore, Brendan and I, a couple of other guys, we'll show you around. Single cask is great, but there's plenty of other places you should check out as well, for sure.
Well, I think it's looking at Brendan's Facebook page as well. He's drinking a lot of these other places as well, so he's not biased to his own bar. Yeah.
Oh, he's still biased to his own bar, but not solely.
Yes.
He's got a pretty good bar. It's definitely amongst the top ones I would always recommend. Yeah. Not going to say any more than that, Brendan, if you're still listening, but it is good.
Right. But hey, I just want to thank you for your time. That was
thank
brilliant.
You, man.
Yeah. I've learned a thing or two as well. I'll just end the video here. Thank you everyone who's been watching. You can keep leaving comments, and we'll just answer them for you. Otherwise, thank you once again, Matthew.
Pleasure, mate. Sure. I almost finished, but I left a sip of this to finish at the end. Cheers to good health.
Cool. Thank you.
All right, man. Talk to you soon.